The night had a pulse of its own. The forest was alive with whispers, trees swaying in rhythm to a wind that carried both scent and sorrow. Beyond the tree line, a moon hung heavy and cold, silver light pouring through layers of fog that rolled like an ocean tide across the valley. She walked alone. Her boots sank into the damp earth, her cloak clinging to her skin, soaked with dew and fear. Each step echoed softly, swallowed by the mist. Her name was Alara, a wanderer, an outcast from the village beyond the ridge, a place that had forgotten her long before she had the chance to belong. The villagers said the forest was cursed. They spoke of a phantom wolf, white as snow, whose eyes burned like embers and whose howl could stop hearts. But Alara had never believed their tales. She had spent her life doubting stories, until that night. The air shifted, the silence cracked. Somewhere in the fog ahead, a low growl rippled through the stillness, deep and resonant, like the earth itself was speaking. Her heartbeat stumbled. She turned toward the sound, breath fogging the air before her lips. Then, through the mist, she saw it. A wolf. Massive, powerful, its coat glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. It stood motionless, head raised, watching her. For a long, trembling heartbeat, neither moved. The forest held its breath. Alara should have run. Every story she had ever heard warned her to. But something deeper called her forward, not fear, but recognition. A pull, quiet and ancient, like the memory of a dream she had once lived but forgotten. The wolf turned away, and without understanding why, she followed. Step by step, deeper into the veil of mist. The forest around her blurred, trees melting into shadows, ground fading beneath her feet. Only the wolf remained clear before her, its silver fur shimmering like light on water. She could hear it breathing. Slow, calm, almost human. The air grew colder. The fog thickened until it became a living thing, curling around her wrists, tugging at her cloak, whispering words she could not understand. The world beyond it vanished. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the wolf stopped. It turned to face her again, eyes glowing with an unearthly fire. Alara froze, caught between awe and terror. The creature stepped closer, until she could see the scar that ran across its muzzle, the breath rising from its nostrils in ghostly clouds. It looked at her, through her, as if it knew every secret she carried, every pain she buried. The ground trembled. A rush of wind spiraled through the trees, lifting her hair, her cloak, the leaves around her in a cyclone of light. The mist pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't her own. And then, the wolf began to change. Bones shifted. Muscles twisted beneath fur that turned to skin. Light broke like shattered glass across the clearing, and when it faded, the beast was gone. In its place stood a man. Tall, bare-chested, power etched into every line of his frame. His eyes, the same burning gold, locked onto hers, filled with the same wildness and sorrow the wolf had carried. Alara stumbled back, heart crashing against her ribs. But she could not look away. He stood there in the moonlight, the mist coiling around him like a crown, ancient and regal. His voice did not need to be heard to command her silence. The air around him shimmered with authority, primal, unyielding. He was the storm that every story warned her about. The Alpha King. And though the forest was deathly still, Alara could swear she heard something, a whisper from the mist, almost like a vow. You were never meant to run from the wild, Alara. You were meant to be part of it. The words echoed in her mind though his lips never moved. Then, everything went black. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was his eyes, molten gold, filled with something far more dangerous than hatred. Recognition. As if he had been waiting for her, forever. When consciousness returned, Alara was no longer standing in the forest. She lay upon a stone floor, cold and ancient, beneath the glow of flickering torches. The scent of smoke and pine filled the air. Her fingers brushed against carved symbols etched deep into the stone. Runes she did not understand but that pulsed faintly beneath her touch, alive and breathing. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, wolves howled. Not wild, desperate cries, but disciplined, ritualistic, as though the night itself was answering a call older than time. Alara rose slowly, her head spinning. She wasn't dreaming. The world around her was real, too real. The stones whispered as she moved, the shadows watching her like sentinels. And though she saw no one, she felt him. The presence. The same heat she had felt in the forest. The Alpha King. Her heart stuttered at the memory, the transformation, the golden eyes that burned with both fury and sorrow. She had followed a creature into the mist, and now she was in his world, a kingdom hidden beyond mortal sight, built within the bones of the forest. A sound stirred behind her, low footsteps, steady, powerful. She turned, breath caught in her throat. He appeared from the shadows like a god descending from smoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence filled the room before his voice ever could. His dark hair fell over his forehead, damp with mist, and the faint shimmer of power still clung to his skin. The air around him shifted with his every movement, as if even the elements obeyed his command. The Alpha King did not speak. He simply looked at her, long, searching, as if seeing not her body but her soul. And in that gaze, Alara felt something she could not name, something buried deep, ancient and aching. She wanted to ask who he was, where she was, but the questions died before they reached her lips. The room itself seemed to hold its breath in his presence. Then, without words, he extended his hand. When she hesitated, the air trembled, and the torches flared brighter, casting gold across the runes beneath her feet. Her body moved before her mind could resist. Her fingers brushed his, and in that single contact, the world shattered. Visions flooded her mind, flashes of war, wolves locked in battle beneath a blood-red moon. A woman screaming his name. The Alpha King kneeling beside her lifeless body, his eyes consumed by rage. The same mist that had led Alara into the forest swirling around him, binding him, cursing him to eternal solitude. She gasped and tore her hand away, stumbling back, the visions vanishing like smoke. The curse, the pain, the kingdom wrapped in endless twilight. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Though his lips remained still, she heard him in her mind, his voice a whisper of thunder. You shouldn't be here. Her breath trembled. The voice carried weight, not anger, but fear. Fear for her. The mist took you because it recognized you, the voice continued. You carry the scent of something it has long awaited. She didn't understand, but deep down, something in her did. There was a connection, invisible, undeniable. A thread of fate woven between them. The moment she saw his wolf in the forest, her life had been rewritten. He turned away, cloak shifting like shadow. The room darkened as his power drew back. The torches dimmed, and the howls outside rose higher, echoing in ritual rhythm. Through a high archway of stone, Alara glimpsed a courtyard bathed in moonlight. Wolves, not beasts, but men and women, stood in formation, half-shifted, eyes burning gold. They knelt as he appeared. Their king, the Alpha. Alara watched, trembling, as he descended the steps, the mist curling around his feet like loyal servants. Every movement he made carried the weight of centuries, strength carved by grief, power born from loneliness. A voice, softer, older, spoke from the shadows beside her. It belonged to a woman cloaked in silver, eyes pale as frost. The high seer of the pack. You shouldn't have followed him, child. The mist chooses only those tied to the moonblood curse. You have crossed into a kingdom trapped between life and legend. Alara turned to her, fear and awe tangled in her chest. What curse? The seer's gaze flickered toward the Alpha King in the courtyard below. A curse born from love and betrayal. Once, our Alpha defied the will of T. He moon goddess. He loved a mortal, your ancestor. And when she died, the goddess bound him to the mist, to wander until her bloodline returned. The truth fell like thunder. Alara's breath caught. The visions, the pull, the recognition in his eyes, they all aligned into a single, terrifying truth. She was the descendant of the woman he had once loved. And she was standing inside the curse itself. The seer's hand brushed her shoulder, gentle but heavy with warning. If the Alpha recognizes your soul, the curse may break, or consume you both. Below, the Alpha King raised his head, as if hearing every word. His eyes met Alara's across the distance, gold flames in the dark. The wind rose. The mist surged through the courtyard, wrapping him once more in silver spirals. And before she could blink, he vanished into it, leaving behind nothing but silence and the echo of a heartbeat that wasn't hers. The seer whispered, voice trembling. The mist has begun to awaken. And when it does, no mortal heart remains untouched. Music swells, strings and low drums building into mystery. Alara sank to her knees, her hand clutching the mark that now glowed faintly across her palm. A crescent moon of light, burning softly. The mist had chosen her. But for what purpose, she did not yet know. The mark on her hand burned all through the night. It wasn't fire, not pain exactly, it was something deeper. Like her veins had learned a language older than life itself, and her heart was racing to keep up with the rhythm. The crescent shimmered beneath her skin, faint and silver at first, then growing brighter whenever she tried to ignore it. No matter how she rubbed it, no matter how tightly she clenched her fist, it pulsed, alive, responding to something she could neither see nor control. Alara stood at the edge of the stone balcony overlooking the courtyard. The dawn hadn't yet come, the sky remained the color of bruised steel. The wolves below had dispersed into the forest, leaving behind a silence that pressed against her chest like a weight. Somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the veil of mist, the Alpha King was moving. She could feel him, not see him, not hear him, but feel him. Each flicker of her mark echoed with his pulse, a pull so strong it left her dizzy. She didn't want to admit it. But their souls were connected now. The seer's words echoed in her mind, if the Alpha recognizes your soul, the curse may break, or consume you both. She didn't yet understand what it meant to be part of the curse, or why the mist had chosen her. But she knew this much, the mist didn't take without purpose. And she, the girl who once belonged nowhere, was now bound to a kingdom that should not exist. The hours passed like whispers. Servants came and went in silence, elves in human form, their eyes downcast in reverence and fear. They brought her food she could not eat, clothes she did not recognize. The garments shimmered faintly under torchlight, woven with threads that looked like strands of moonlight itself. Each time she caught sight of her reflection in the silver basin, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her hair gleamed darker, her eyes faintly brighter, as though the mist had reached inside her and begun changing what it found. Then, when the first light of dawn barely touched the forest canopy, the chamber doors opened. The seer returned. Her presence made the air colder. Power clung to her like frost, soft yet commanding. She carried a staff carved from white wood, etched with the same runes that glowed beneath the floor where Alara had first awakened. The mark has begun its awakening, the seer murmured, her voice low. You feel it, don't you? Alara didn't answer, but the seer saw the truth in her eyes. The moonblood mark ties your soul to his. When he calls, you will feel it. When he suffers, your heart will ache. And when he approaches, her gaze lifted toward the mist beyond the balcony. Your pulse will no longer belong to you. Alara swallowed, her throat tight. What happens when it's complete? The seer's silence said more than words ever could. When the mark reaches your heart, you will either break the curse, or become part of it. The wind howled through the corridor, sharp, sudden, as though in warning. The seer's eyes shifted. He is coming. The scene widens, torches dim. The air thickens with silver fog pouring into the hall like flowing smoke. Alara's pulse quickened, the mark blazing bright. Each step echoed like a drumbeat. The world slowed. Then he appeared, the Alpha King. Not as he had been before, fierce and wrathful, but cloaked in quiet. The mist curled at his boots as if drawn by devotion. His eyes were no longer pure gold. They shimmered now, softer, almost human, but still carrying that edge of danger. He stopped before her. She could not breathe. The silence between them was thunderous. He did not need to speak, the air itself moved with his unspoken thoughts. The world around him seemed to bend to his will. Then, faintly, his voice filled her mind again, deep, steady, both gentle and commanding. You carry the moon's flame. You should not be here. Alara's lips parted, but before she could answer, pain cut through her palm, the mark flaring bright white. The king's eyes flickered in recognition, and for the briefest second, his mask of power cracked. He reached forward instinctively, his hand wrapping around hers. The touch set the air alight. The torches flared. The floor trembled. The walls shimmered with runes that had slept for centuries, suddenly reawakening in a rush of light. Alara gasped. The pain vanished, replaced by warmth. She felt his heartbeat, not through his chest, but through the air itself. Slow, heavy, eternal. Visions flooded her again. A moonlit temple. A woman, pale, beautiful, wearing the same crescent mark, running through the mist. The Alpha King chasing her, desperate, broken. Her laughter fading as the mist closed around her. The voice of the moon goddess, soft, sad. You defied the law of the pack for love. Now love will be your prison. Then, a flash, the curse being cast, the mist turning from veil to chain. The king falling to his knees. His eyes burning gold with endless rage and grief. The vision shattered, and she fell to her knees, gasping. When she looked up, the Alpha King was kneeling too. His expression was no longer cold, it was human, haunted. You saw it, his voice echoed through her. The night I was bound. Alara could only nod. The truth pressed down on her like a storm. Your blood carries her memory, he continued. And that is why the mist brought you to me. He rose slowly, gaze fixed on the horizon where dawn fought to break through the fog. The mark is not a blessing, Alara. It is a key, she whispered, trembling. A key to what? His voice darkened, filled with centuries of sorrow. To the door that leads to freedom, or destruction. The mist stirred again, curling higher, wrapping around them like a living shroud. And for a moment, as the sunlight tried to pierce it, Alara thought she saw shapes, shadows moving within the fog. Wolves that weren't alive but not dead either. Spirits of the Moonblood pack. Bound, waiting, watching, and as she looked closer, she saw something impossible. One of the spirits looked like her. Same eyes, same hair, the reflection of a soul reborn. The king's voice trembled, not in fear, but in awe. The curse is awakening faster than I thought. He stepped closer, his gaze fierce, protective. You must not leave the fortress. Not until the full moon rises. Not until I find a way to sever the bond between us. But even as he said it, their hands remained joined, the light between them refusing to fade. The seer's voice echoed faintly from afar. The mark does not sever, my king. It only chooses its path. The Alpha King closed his eyes. His expression unreadable, his heart torn between duty and something far more dangerous. And when his gaze returned to Alara, the world seemed to vanish around them, mist, light, time itself, until only the two of them remained, tethered by fate neither had chosen. The mist whispered again, a voice both ancient and new, the bond is made. The moon has chosen. The hearts will burn, and the curse will break, or bind. The scene faded into the sound of a distant howl. Not one of pain, but of destiny awakening. Music swells, strings, rising drums, then silence. Alara's eyes lifted toward the moon now breaking through the mist. The mark glowed once more, brighter than ever. And in that moment, she finally understood. This was not the end of her wandering. It was the beginning of the fate she had been born for. Soft orchestral hum fades in, deep strings and the whisper of a wind that carries voices from another world. The moon was not always crimson. Long before Alara's birth, before the curse, before the mist, there had been a time when the night sky was gentle, and the wolves of the Moonblood line lived unbound beneath the goddess's gaze. But that peace had ended with one betrayal, and the blood of love that stained the moon forever red. Now, centuries later, the same crimson glow bled once again through the clouds. And the kingdom stirred. Alara woke to the sound of it, a low hum that vibrated through the walls of her chamber, rattling the glass, shivering across the surface of the floor. The mark on her palm burned, brighter than ever before. Outside, the mist had thickened, no longer silver but tinted with faint scarlet hues. It pulsed, alive, as though it too felt the call of the blood moon. Her heart pounded in time with it. Somewhere in the depths of the fortress, the Alpha King's power was awakening. She could feel it before she saw it, a storm, coiled and rising. Alara pushed open the balcony doors, and the cold air hit her face, sharp and alive. The sky above was a churning sea of clouds, and through the break between them, a red moon glowed, enormous and unblinking. Below, the wolves of the Alpha's court gathered in silence, hundreds of them, cloaked in mist and reverence. They formed a circle around an altar carved of black stone, its surface etched with the runes of old. And in the center stood him, the Alpha King. The mist rolled like waves at his feet, his eyes golden and fierce against the red light. His cloak billowed in the wind, and when he lifted his head, the moonlight struck his face, both man and beast, mortal and god. The sound that followed was not human. It was a call, primal, ancient, echoing through every corner of the land. Wolves across the forest answered, their howls blending into a single, soul-shaking chorus. Alara felt her chest tighten. She could not explain why, but tears filled her eyes. It was beautiful and terrifying. The seer appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. "It begins again," she whispered. "The blood moon has risen. The prophecy unfolds." Alara's voice trembled as she stared down at the scene. "What prophecy?" The seer turned, her eyes reflecting both moon and mist. "The curse was never meant to last forever," she said. "When the moon bleeds red and the alpha's heart beats in rhythm with a mortal soul, the mist will demand a choice, one life for the freedom of all." Alara's breath caught. "A life? The one who carries the moonblood mark must decide," the seer murmured. "To save the king, or save herself." The words struck her like a blade. She looked at her hand. The mark pulsed in time with his heartbeat below. The connection was undeniable. She didn't understand why she had been chosen. She had never asked for this. But the pull between them had already rooted too deep. It wasn't just a curse anymore. It was a bond neither could escape. The scene shifts, deep drumbeats echo like a ritual beginning. Below, the alpha raised his arms, and the mist obeyed. It swirled upward in towering columns, shaping forms, wolves made of shadow, spirits of the fallen pack. Their eyes glowed white as moonlight, their howls resonating through stone and soul alike. Alara felt the mark on her hand flare, pulling her forward. She clutched her chest, gasping as warmth flooded her veins. The seer reached out to stop her, but it was too late, the mist had already chosen. A gust of wind lifted her cloak, and she was drawn from the balcony, down into the courtyard, her feet barely touching the ground. The wolves parted as she approached, bowing their heads. The alpha turned. The instant his gaze met hers, the world stopped. The blood moon brightened, drenching them both in red light. The mist coiled around them, sealing the space. No one else existed. And for a moment, there was silence. A silence that spoke more than words. Then the alpha's power surged. The runes carved into the altar began to glow, one by one, like hearts awakening after centuries of sleep. Alara stood before him, her mark blazing in response. The seer's voice carried faintly through the wind, a whisper of the prophecy, spoken to the heavens. When blood and moon unite, the mist will demand a price. When past and present meet, love will either heal or destroy. The alpha shall not be free unless the chosen heart breaks willingly. The words echoed, wrapping around them both. Alara's heart twisted. The truth was clear now, she wasn't merely a visitor, nor a savior. She was the vessel through which the curse would decide its end. The alpha's eyes softened for the briefest second, the weight of centuries reflected in their golden depths. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, until the air between them burned. The mist rose higher. The wolves knelt. The runes pulsed in rhythm with two heartbeats, one human, one divine. The prophecy had awakened, and Alara was its center. The blood moon above seemed to pulse, dripping scarlet light upon the stones. The mist whispered words she could almost understand now, voices of those who had died under its curse. They were not angry. They were waiting. For her. The alpha's presence enveloped her completely. She could feel his soul, the grief, the strength, the loneliness. And beneath it all, a fragile thing he had hidden from the world for centuries, hope. A wind swept through the courtyard. The spirits howled once more. And in the distance, thunder rumbled, though no storm touched the sky. Something ancient had been stirred awake. Alara's mark burned so brightly that it split the skin, glowing pure white. She fell to her knees, clutching her palm as the light spilled onto the stone, forming a circle, a seal of fate. The alpha knelt before her, his voice a whisper carried by the mist, unheard yet undeniable. "It's beginning." And above them, the moon trembled, alive, bleeding, watching. The world seemed to breathe in. And everything went still. The world did not end when the blood moon rose. But it changed. The mist no longer felt like air, it was alive, pulsing, breathing in rhythm with the two hearts that had awakened beneath its crimson veil. The wolves in the courtyard trembled, their bodies bowing under the force that rippled outward from the alpha and the marked mortal who stood before him. The ancient runes beneath Alara's feet burned brighter, then dimmed, as though waiting, listening, judging. And then, silence. The light faded, and the world exhaled. Alara opened her eyes. The mark on her palm no longer glowed with blinding power. Instead, it shimmered softly, its light ebbing like moonlight after a storm. Around her, the mist had settled into a low, swirling sea, calm but watchful. The Alpha King stood a few steps away. His golden eyes were darker now, less flame, more ember, as if centuries of torment had cracked, just enough for something human to bleed through. He looked at her, not as a ruler to a trespasser, but as a man seeing something he'd lost and found again in the same breath. For the first time, the curse seemed to loosen its grip on him. The chains that had wrapped around his soul, invisible but heavy as iron, trembled with weakness. His heart, long turned to stone, stirred. And it was her presence that had done it. The mist knew it. The goddess knew it. Even the wolves sensed it, the balance shifting, the prophecy inching closer to its fulfillment. The Alpha closed his eyes, and in that quiet, the air around them changed. A soft wind brushed against Alara's face, carrying the faintest whisper, not of the seer, not of spirits, but of the king himself, thoughts that bled from his mind into hers through their bond. It was not a voice of command, but of memory. A prayer. Once, I swore never to love again. Once, I buried my heart beneath the ashes of her grave. And yet, the moment you stepped into my mist, it began to beat again. Alara felt the words deep within her bones, even though her ears heard nothing. Her eyes stung with tears that were not entirely her own. He turned toward the altar, placing a hand on the ancient stone. The runes beneath his palm flickered weakly, as if recognizing their master's change. For centuries, he had stood before that altar in fury, pleading, fighting, demanding the goddess lift his curse. But now, as the red moon dimmed into pale gold, he did not beg. He only stood, silent, letting the power of fate settle between them. The seer appeared once more in the courtyard's edge, her face shadowed by her hood. She did not speak. She only bowed her head. Because she too could feel it, the shift. The heartbeat of the kingdom, long silenced, had started again. The wolves lifted their heads toward the heavens and howled, not in sorrow this time, but in reverence. A new sound, softer, steadier, as though the mist itself had joined them in song. Alara stood motionless, her cloak whipping in the cold wind. Every sound, every movement felt distant, like the world was folding inward around her. She looked at the Alpha King and saw not the creature of legend, not the god wrapped in shadow, but the man beneath it all. And for the first time, she understood what the curse truly was. It wasn't just punishment. It was a cage built from grief. A grief so deep, it had sealed away the heart of an entire kingdom. The curse had never been about vengeance, it was about loss. And she, the last of the Moonblood line, had been brought here not to destroy the king, but to remind him how to feel. Scene widens, the forest around the fortress trembles, as if sensing the awakening within. The mists began to retreat, rolling back like an obedient tide. The first light of dawn cut through the horizon, faint gold against the dying red of the moon. For the first time in centuries, sunlight touched the stones of the Alpha's realm. The wolves cowered at first, unused to the light. Then they rose, one by one, their shadows melting away. The fog that had imprisoned the kingdom started to thin, and the trees whispered with the breath of morning. Alara felt warmth against her skin. It was more than sunlight. It was freedom beginning to bloom. And yet, the moment the light touched the altar, the runes flared again, violently. The seer's voice broke through the calm, sharp with warning. The curse resists. The bond is not yet complete. Alara gasped as pain struck her chest, the mark burning anew, brighter, angrier. The light that had filled her hand now crawled up her arm, across her shoulder, reaching for her heart. She fell to her knees. The Alpha rushed to her side, his power flickering like wildfire. The mist screamed, a thousand wisp. RS rising at once, the voices of the bound wolves calling, pleading. The prophecy demanded more. The awakening was not the end. It was only the beginning of the price. The seer stepped forward, her eyes wide. The moon's mark is choosing its path, she said softly. It tests the strength of your bond. If your heart rejects him, the curse will consume you. But if you yield, it may consume you both. The Alpha's gaze locked onto Alara's face. He could feel her pain through the tether that linked them, every heartbeat, every tremor. But Alara, through the agony, looked up at him with steady eyes. And though no words passed her lips, the mist carried her thought to him, a whisper soft as wind. Then let it take me. I will not run. The moment she accepted it, the pain stopped. The light that had been devouring her heart steadied, warm, steady, alive. And through their bond, the Alpha felt something he hadn't in centuries, peace. The chains that bound his spirit cracked. Not fully broken, not yet free, but weakened. The mist quieted. The altar dimmed. The curse had loosened by a fraction, but the cost had been set in motion. As dawn spread across the horizon, painting the sky with gold and rose, Alara collapsed into the Alpha's arms, unconscious but breathing. He held her like something sacred, his heart beating against hers. The mist swirled around them, not in menace this time, but in protection. The wolves howled again, long and low, a song of mourning and rebirth. The seer watched in silence, the faintest tear glimmering at the corner of her eye. The heart of the Alpha awakens, she whispered. But so does the fate of all who dwell within the mist. The sun climbed higher, touching every corner of the cursed land. For the first time in ages, light fell upon the face of the Alpha King, and it revealed not a monster, but a man rediscovering what it meant to be alive. The world was awakening, but every awakening comes with a price. The curse that had once held the Alpha King's domain captive was weakening. The air was warmer, the forests breathed again, and light pierced the cracks of the old fortress walls. Yet beneath that fragile dawn, shadows moved like restless ghosts, whispering warnings of storms yet to come. Days passed, though time felt strange in the mist. Alara slept in the highest chamber of the castle, her heartbeat steady but distant, as though her soul drifted between two worlds. The Alpha watched over her from the shadows, silent, vigilant. Outside, the wolves had grown uneasy. They prowled restlessly at the borders of the mist, their instincts stirring with a fear older than memory. Something ancient had awakened with the breaking of the first seal, something that had slept beneath the roots of the land for centuries, Fae. Adding on the curse that now began to die. The seer wandered the castle halls, her fingers tracing runes that had been carved by generations long gone. The symbols glowed faintly as she passed, whispering to her of what was yet to come. The first bond had been forged. The heart of the Alpha had begun to beat again. But the mist, now unbound, had started to spread beyond its borders, reaching into realms that had long forgotten the wolves' existence. A storm was gathering, not of weather, but of power. Slow pan across the horizon, thunder clouds twisting above forests that shimmer with ghostly light. In the distance, across the mountain range, a dark citadel stirred. A figure cloaked in black stood at its balcony, eyes like shards of ice fixed upon the storm blooming in the east. He felt it too, the tremor, the shift in the old magic. For centuries, he had waited for the Alpha's curse to hold. He had built his dominion in the shadows of that frozen kingdom. And now, as the chains broke, his empire began to crumble. The breaking of the curse meant his power would fade. And so, he began to move. The wolves of his own command, corrupted by dark magic, stirred beneath his throne, their eyes glowing crimson. They were not wolves of moonlight and honor, but beasts of shadow and decay. They carried the scent of death, and their howls were filled with hunger. The Shadow Alpha had awakened. Cut back to the misted realm, inside the Alpha King's castle. Alara's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. The room was bathed in soft gold light, filtered through enchanted glass. She felt warmth on her skin, but it was a fragile warmth, as if borrowed. Her memories were fragmented. She remembered the altar, the pain, the blood moon, and the moment she'd felt the Alpha's heart beat against hers. She had survived, but not unchanged. The mark on her hand was no longer a faint shimmer. It was a flame, slow and steady, pulsing in rhythm with the Alpha's life. The bond had deepened, connecting them beyond body, beyond thought. When she closed her eyes, she could feel him, not beside her, but within. Somewhere deep in the castle, the Alpha stood before a great mirror of black stone. His reflection shimmered and shifted, revealing not his face but flashes of her, her breath, her heartbeat, the flicker of her dreams. It frightened him, this bond. He had lived lifetimes alone, untouched by time or tenderness. To feel her pain as his own was a gift he did not know how to bear. But it was also his salvation. The seer's words echoed in the corridors of his mind, One heart cannot bear two fates. Either the curse breaks, or it consumes you both. The Alpha had spent centuries mastering his rage. But now, with her life entwined with his, fear had become his new tormentor. He feared losing her before he could understand why she had been sent to him at all. He turned away from the mirror, the sound of thunder rolling through the mist outside. The storm had begun, soft rain now falling upon the once frozen soil, awakening life long forgotten. But beneath that beauty lurked unease. The forest whispered with voices that did not belong to wolves. Creatures were stirring, the kind that should never have survived the curse. Scene widens, deep within the forest, far from the castle. The mist had thinned near the outer borders. Where light touched the ground, black roots began to crawl upward from the earth, pulsing, moving, alive. They slithered like veins, carrying whispers of the Shadow Alpha's will. The air grew heavy. Ravens circled above dead trees. And then, from the soil, the first of the corrupted wolves emerged, their fur dark as pitch, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They did not howl. They screamed. They had come for the girl. Back inside the castle, Alara stands on the balcony, wind whipping through her hair. The camera moves slowly around her. She felt it before anyone else did, the chill that crawled up her spine, the tremor beneath her feet. Her mark flared with light, warning her of what approached. She didn't yet understand her power, but instinct drove her forward. Down below, the wolves of the Alpha's pack began to howl, not in reverence, but in alarm. The seer appeared beside her, robes fluttering in the wind. Her expression was grave. The storm that gathered over the valley was not made of rain. It was the dark mist, the kind that devours, not protects. The prophecy's second phase had begun. For the curse to break completely, the heart that bound the mist had to face its shadow, its reflection. The Alpha King and the Shadow Alpha, two halves of the same destiny, were bound to collide. And she, the Moonblood heir, was the key to which side would fall. Thunder cracks. The camera pans over the valley where black wolves charge through the fog. Their eyes glow red. Lightning flashes. The sky roars. Inside the castle, the Alpha stands at the highest tower, his cloak billowing, his eyes burning with golden fire. He sees the storm for what it is, the world testing him again. The mist trembles beneath his command. He knows this fight is not for his throne or his pride. It is for her, for the mortal girl who had walked into his mist and turned his curse into something worth breaking. He calls upon the wolves. The great cry of the pack rises through the storm, shaking the valley. The mist gathers, swirling into a protective barrier around the fortress. And at the heart of it all, Alara stands, her mark glowing bright enough to challenge the lightning itself. Her destiny. Why is no longer hidden. She is no longer the girl who followed a wolf into the mist. She is now the one who commands it. Camera pans upward, the storm converging, two forces meeting across the horizon, one of light and gold, one of shadow and blood. The earth trembles, the sky splits. A battle older than the world is about to begin. The gathering storm had come. And with it, the fate of two souls, one cursed, one chosen, began to intertwine in the fire of destiny. The mist roared that night. It was not wind, it was the sound of power breaking free of its prison. The wolves could sense it before any human could see it. They retreated into the shadows, their ears pressed back, their hearts trembling in reverence and fear. Across the valley, light met darkness. On one side, the golden glow of the Alpha King's domain, the ancient stone fortress surrounded by the silver mist of his command. On the other, a wall of black fog rising like a living ocean, the advance of the Shadow Alpha and his corrupted pack. Lightning cut the sky, illuminating both armies, two kingdoms born of the same curse, divided by time and grief. Alara stood upon the highest tower, her cloak whipping like a flag in the storm. Beneath her feet, the runes carved into the castle walls blazed to life, responding to her pulse. The bond between her and the Alpha King had become the heartbeat of the realm itself. Every thrum of her heart sent waves of light into the mist. The seer's voice echoed through the thunder, not aloud, but through the mind, a whisper that trembled like wind against glass. The curse will end when the two hearts meet, not in hatred, but in understanding. But there was no understanding in what approached. Only vengeance. The camera sweeps over the battlefield. The shadow Alpha emerged from the black fog, his form vast and terrible. His eyes burned red, and his claws dragged lines of fire into the earth. Around him moved his army, hundreds of wolves twisted by dark magic, their bodies scarred by the curse they had embraced instead of resisted. He was the mirror of the Alpha King, same power, same blood, but consumed by the very thing the king had sought to destroy. It was said that once, long ago, before the curse, there had been two brothers, heirs to the Moon Kingdom. One had been chosen by the goddess, the other forsaken. The one who was forsaken had turned to shadow, vowing to make the world remember his pain. That brother now stood before his twin, and the world trembled between them. Cut to the Alpha King, standing on the fortress wall, golden eyes glowing like dawn through the storm. He did not roar or command. He simply raised his hand. And the mist obeyed. It poured from the mountains, from the rivers, from the very soil beneath the feet, twisting upward into colossal waves of light. The wolves of his pack lifted their heads and howled, their voices merging into a single, defiant cry. The shadow Alpha answered with darkness, a wave of corrupted fog, red as blood and thick as oil. When the two mists met, the air cracked like shattered glass. The sky exploded in a storm of light and shadow. The battle had begun. Narration deepens, tone slows, describing the chaos cinematically. The two forces clashed like elements of creation, white and black, gold and crimson, wind against fire, light against rot. Every blow was a storm, every movement reshaping the very land. Wolves collided in midair, their claws sparking against one another. The ground quaked with each impact, trees splitting, stones rising from the soil as magic warped reality. In the heart of it all, the Alpha King moved like a god unleashed. Every motion of his hand bent the mist to his will, forming shields, blades, storms of energy that tore through the enemy ranks. But the shadow Alpha was not merely powerful, he was endless. His darkness devoured whatever light touched it, feeding on rage and sorrow. Every time one of his wolves fell, another rose from its ashes. It was not a battle of armies. It was a battle of endurance. A war between hope and despair itself. Cut to Alara, on the tower, her mark blazing brighter with every passing minute. She could feel both sides, the agony, the fury, the heartbreak of brothers destined to destroy one another. Her chest ached with a pain that was not her own. She fell to her knees as visions flooded her mind, fragments of the past the mist had hidden from all. She saw two children running through a field under the silver moon, one laughing, one chasing. She saw a crown forged of moonstone passed to the elder brother. And she saw betrayal, not of malice, but of love denied. The curse had not been born from evil. It had been born from loss. The forsaken brother had begged the goddess to grant him power, not to rule, but to be seen. When she refused, he stole the magic himself, twisting it until it poisoned everything it touched. And so the Alpha's line was split in two, one of light, one of darkness, both cursed to exist until love returned to mend what was broken. Alara rises, trembling, her eyes burning with resolve. She understood now. The curse could not be broken by battle. It could only be undone by the merging of what had been divided. But the Alpha King, blinded by duty, and his brother, consumed by pain, could not see it. They were bound to repeat the same destruction, again and again, until one destroyed the other. Alara stepped to the edge of the tower. Lightning illuminated her face, calm amidst chaos. The mark on her skin flared, sending ripples through the air. The mist responded, swirling toward her, wrapping around her like armor of moonlight. She was no longer merely human. She was the bridge between them, the balance the goddess had hidden within mortal flesh. Cut to the battlefield. Both alphas face each other now, towering in their true forms. Massive wolves, one white and gold, the other black and crimson. Their roars collided, shaking the heavens. When their claws met, time itself seemed to halt. And in that suspended moment, a beam of light cut through the clouds, soft, pure, unyielding. Alara descended into the field, her presence stopping both armies. Her feet touched the ground, and every wolf bowed instinctively, even the corrupted ones. The mist parted for her. She walked between the two beasts, fearless, her gaze steady. The Alpha King's golden eyes flickered with recognition and confusion. The shadow Alpha snarled, darkness writhing around him. But when she raised her hand, both forces faltered. The mark upon her skin blazed like a star, and a voice, ancient, sorrowful, filled the air. It was the voice of the moon goddess. Two hearts divided, one heart sent to heal. The curse you wear was not punishment, it was memory. Remember who you were. The ground shuddered. The brothers froze, their power flickering, their forms shifting. For the first time, they saw each other not as enemies, but as what they had once been: blood, family, reflection. And in that silence, the storm began to break. The dark mist dissolved into rain. The gold light faded into dawn. The wolves lowered their heads. The land grew quiet again. The seer appears beside Alara, watching as both alphas collapse, not in death, but in exhaustion. The curse had cracked. Not fully shattered, but its roots had been exposed. The bond between light and shadow had begun to heal. But Alara's strength was gone. She fell to the earth, her vision blurring as the world shimmered between darkness and dawn. Her last sight was of the Alpha King, crawling toward her through the fading mist, his hand reaching for hers. And as their fingers brushed, the storm finally ceased. The camera pans upward, clouds opening to reveal a silver full moon shining upon the battlefield. The wind whispers across the ruins, carrying peace for the first time in centuries. The battle was over. But the prophecy had one final line left unfulfilled. The world slept after the storm. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was the fragile stillness of a wound that had yet to heal. The mists had thinned, revealing a valley bathed in early light. The once torn earth had begun to mend itself, the cracks closing as though the land remembered its shape. Yet the air trembled with residual power, the kind that lingers after gods have touched the world. The Alpha King lay among the ruins of the battlefield, his body marked by the traces of both victory and loss. His golden armor, once radiant, was dulled with blood and ash. Around him, the wolves of his pack gathered in silence, their heads lowered, their fur heavy with rain. The shadow Alpha was gone, dissolved into mist, or perhaps returned to the darkness that had birthed him. None could say. But in the air, there was the faintest echo of his last heartbeat, a sound like sorrow carried by the wind. Alara lay beside the fallen Alpha King, her body frail but breathing. Her skin glowed faintly with moonlight, her mark pulsing slowly, each beat a whisper of life. She looked almost asleep, but her soul drifted somewhere far beyond the reach of mortal breath. The seer stood at a distance, her robes soaked, her eyes filled with grief. She knew what had happened. The curse had broken its shell, but not its core. For the bond that held the curse was not in the land, nor the wolves, nor the mist. It was in her. Slow pan, the camera moves through the valley, showing life awakening. Tiny shoots of green push through the cracked soil. The rivers, once blackened by magic, shimmer with new light. Ravens scatter from trees now reborn with leaves of silver. The first light of dawn touched the castle towers, and for the first time in centuries, the banners stirred in the breeze. The wolves lifted their heads and howled, not in fear, not in mourning, but in reverence. The kingdom was waking. And yet, the Alpha King did not move. He knelt beside Alara, his golden eyes dim, his power flickering like a dying flame. He felt the pulse of her heart within his own, faint and distant, as though the goddess had tied their souls together with threads of fading light. He could sense her, somewhere deep within the mist. Trapped not in death, but between realms. The wind rises, the mist thickens, swirling like a living spirit around her still body. There is a realm between the world of the living and the divine, a place of echoes, where the souls of those bound by magic wander until their fates are decided. It was there that Alara now walked. Cut to the other world. A dreamscape bathed in silver mist and floating fragments of light. The ground is soft and shimmering like water. She opened her eyes to find herself standing in a vast expanse of nothingness. Above her, the moon hung impossibly close, its light reflecting upon the mist like the surface of a sea. Beneath her feet, faint ripples moved outward with every step. She was not afraid. There was no fear here, only stillness. But somewhere beyond the silence, she could hear the faint cry of wolves. Each howl was a memory. Each whisper a piece of the world she had left behind. She walked toward the sound, her bare feet leaving no prints behind. The mist parted before her, revealing shapes, glimpses of what had been. The child she once was, chasing the silver wolf through the woods. The first time she had touched the mist and felt it breathe. The Alpha King's eyes when he had looked at her, not with command, but with recognition. She understood now. She was never an outsider in this world. She was its echo, the fragment of the moon goddess's final mercy. Long ago, when the brothers had been divided, the goddess had wept, a single tear that fell to the mortal world. That tear became a soul, human, fragile, and pure, destined to one day walk among wolves and heal what divinity could not. She was that tear, the moon's tear. A soft light appears ahead, the shape of the moon goddess, faceless but radiant, her form woven from light and shadow. The voice that filled the air was not heard but felt. It vibrated through the mist, through the heart, through the soul itself. The goddess did not speak words. She revealed truth, that every curse was born not of cruelty, but of choice. That love, denied, becomes shadow. And that light, when hidden too long, forgets how to shine. Alara saw the brothers' story unfold again, their laughter, their rivalry, their breaking. But now she saw herself woven through it, a strand of fate sent to mend what time had broken. The goddess placed a hand of light over Alara's heart. Where it touched, warmth bloomed, not pain, not fire, but peace. "Return to him," whispered the wind. "For his world cannot wake without your light." And as the goddess faded, Alara felt her soul pulled back, the mist swirling faster, collapsing into a single beam of moonlight. Back to the mortal world, the battlefield glows faintly as the moon pierces the clouds. The Alpha King's eyes snap open. He felt her heartbeat, stronger now, steady. The mark on her palm ignited, and the mist around them began to rise, lifting into the sky like a silver tide returning home. The wolves watched in silence as their world transformed, the fog dissolving into streams of light, the curse unraveling thread by thread. The seer fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She had waited lifetimes to witness this moment. The Alpha gathered Alara in his arms, holding her close as the mist rose higher, carrying the remnants of sorrow with it. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief instant, they reflected the moon itself, pure, endless, alive. The light around them flared, consuming the battlefield. For a moment, the world disappeared. Then, silence. The sound of wind. The camera drifts through the castle, now restored, no longer a ruin, but a home reborn. Light streams through tall windows. He walls breathe with life again. The curse had lifted. The mist was gone. And in its place, morning had returned to the realm of wolves. Alara awoke in the grand hall, resting upon silken sheets. Her body was whole, her heart light. The Alpha King sat beside her, his eyes softened by something the world had not seen in centuries, peace. Though the story was not yet finished, the kingdom had been reborn. Outside, the wolves ran free beneath a sky no longer bound by mist. Rivers sang again. The air smelled of pine and rain, not sorrow. And at the highest tower of the fortress, the seer watched the horizon, whispering words that only the wind could hear. The moon's tear has fallen, and the curse of the Alphas is undone. The camera pans upward, the moon fading into the bright gold of dawn, the kingdom stretching out below like a living painting. The balance had been restored. But destiny, like the tide, never ends. The mist may have lifted. The morning after the storm came with quiet grace. It was not the kind of dawn that blazed across the sky, it was gentler, a tender light that caressed the broken earth as if to say, "You have endured enough." For centuries, the Valley of Wolves had known only twilight, trapped between day and night, between blessing and curse. But now, sunlight touched its heart once more. The rivers, once murky and still, danced like veins of light across the land. The trees stretched, their leaves trembling as if they too had awoken from a long and restless sleep. The kingdom itself seemed to breathe again. The walls of the fortress shimmered with warmth instead of shadow, and the once cold stones held the golden kiss of morning. Wolves roamed the courtyards freely, no longer bound by fear, no longer waiting for the next command of blood or vengeance. They moved with purpose, with ease, their eyes clear and bright like the day itself. And at the center of it all stood the Alpha King. His presence was no longer the thunder it had once been. There was still power in his gaze, the strength that had conquered kingdoms and shattered curses, but it was tempered now by something deeper. The weight of love, the calm of redemption. He looked upon his realm and saw not conquest, but peace. Not domination, but balance. The people had begun to emerge from their shelters. Hunters, healers, warriors, and elders alike stepped into the sun for the first time in years. They looked to the castle where their king stood beside the woman who had saved them all, their Luna, their light, the once rejected Omega who had carried the soul of the moon goddess within her. Alara's hair glistened with the glow of dawn, strands of silver woven through soft waves of gold. Her eyes, clear as morning frost, reflected the sky itself. She was fragile and strong all at once, a living paradox, the embodiment of grace carved by pain. Though her body still bore the faint mark of her sacrifice, her spirit shone with quiet fire. She had crossed realms, broken ancient bindings, and returned not as the Omega they had scorned, but as the queen their souls had awaited. The wolves gathered in the great courtyard beneath the rising sun. The Alpha King stood tall, his shadow stretching across the stones, and though no words passed his lips, his heart spoke through the bond that united every creature of the pack. A ripple of unity surged through the kingdom. The sound of hundreds of hearts beating in rhythm, one pack, one pulse, one destiny. The scene shifts, high above the valley, where the last remnants of the mist drift toward the mountains. The camera follows the silver haze as it curls into the forest, dissolving into the soil, nourishing what had once withered. New flowers bloom across the hillsides. The moon's blessing seeps into the roots of the earth, transforming desolation into beauty. The once dark woods are now alive with birdsong. Cubs play in clear streams that sparkle under the morning light. The mountain wolves howl, not in mourning, but in celebration. Even the seer, who had lived lifetimes waiting for this dawn, smiles through her tears as she watches from her tower. She had feared she would never see this world reborn, yet here it was, vibrant, alive, luminous. In the still air, she whispers ancient words of thanks, letting them float upward to the heavens. And somewhere above the clouds, the moon goddess smiles, not in sorrow, but in peace. Her purpose fulfilled, her tear returned to light. Fade inward, to the castle interior. The halls are filled with quiet life. Candles burn softly, and golden banners flutter with the movement of gentle air. Alara walks through the grand corridor, her bare feet touching the polished stone, each step echoing softly. She moves as though the castle itself remembers her. As if every wall, every door, every ray of light recognizes the one who healed its broken heart. Her hand trails along the carved patterns on the walls, symbols of wolves, moons, and intertwined threads of fate. Once these carvings had pulsed with shadow, now they gleam with soft light, breathing in rhythm with her. In the great hall, she stops before the thrones, two seats carved of white stone, once cold and empty. Now, light flows over them like water. One for the Alpha King, ruler of the wolves. One for her, the Luna who bridged the divine and the mortal. It is not a throne of power, but of balance. And she understands that this is what it was always meant to be. Cut to the training fields outside, young wolves sparring, laughter echoing. The kingdom is alive ag. Ain. The warriors train not for blood, but for strength. The children chase each other through wildflowers, their laughter pure and unburdened. The elders tell tales of the time before the mist, of courage and of loss, and now, at last, of hope. At night, when the moon rises, it no longer hides behind clouds. It shines proudly over the kingdom, casting silver over stone and soil alike. The wolves gather once more under its light, not to fight, but to remember. They remember the curse that bound them, and the girl who broke it. They remember the Alpha who chose love over vengeance. And they howl, a sound that echoes through valleys and across mountains, carrying the story to every living soul that walks beneath the moon. Their song is one of remembrance, of unity, of rebirth. Soft transition, Alara standing upon the balcony, the Alpha King beside her. The wind moves gently through her hair. The kingdom spreads below them, a sea of silver and green. The night is calm, the stars bright and unclouded. For the first time, she feels the world truly alive beneath her feet. This was not the life she had imagined when she was the outcast Omega, shunned and mocked. She had dreamed only of belonging. Yet fate had chosen her for something far greater. She was not born merely to be accepted, she was born to heal. Every scar, every heartbreak, every rejection had shaped her into the vessel strong enough to hold both love and divine power. She had been the goddess's tear, yes, but she was also human, and it was her humanity that had saved them all. The Alpha King looks upon his realm and knows that the age of blood has ended. The laws written in rage will be rewritten in compassion. Strength will no longer mean cruelty. Alpha will no longer mean dominance but protection. He knows that in her presence, he has found what he never knew he lacked, peace. Slow dissolve, to the forest again. The moonlight filters through leaves. In the distance, a lone wolf runs through the trees, free and unbound. The cycle had turned. From darkness to light, from curse to freedom. But even in peace, destiny continues to whisper. For there are always shadows that stir beyond the horizon, waiting for the light to fade, not out of malice, but because the world is built on balance. And though this chapter had ended, another waited to begin, quietly, patiently, in the heartbeat of the earth. Camera pans up, the moon reflected in the river below, shimmering like a memory. For now, the world rests. The wolves sleep beneath the stars, their kingdom whole. And in the deepest chamber of the castle, the moon's tear glows softly beside the sleeping Luna, a reminder that even gods weep for love, and that from every tear, a new dawn is born. The age of the mist had ended. The dawn of the wolves had begun.